day, and welcome to Talk Radio with Dr. K, the place where talk is power. You are listening live at WOKB 1680 AM, or you may be watching us live in a moment on the WOKB 1680 AM Facebook page. Listen, if you're listening and you have the opportunity or the capability to go to the WOKB 1680 AM Facebook page, go ahead and scoot over there so you can watch us on the radio. I am so excited about this new feature to be able to bring Talk Radio with Dr. K to you in multiple ways. So you may be streaming live from the WOKB 1680 website, or you may be tuning in from your radio if you're driving. Or, as I said before, welcome to all of our viewers on the WOKB 1680 AM Facebook page. Listen, while you're there, go ahead and share it. I am about to do that. I'm going to hop over right now to the WOKB 1680 AM Facebook page, and I am going to share it with my people. Glenn, I've got people. Did you know that?
Yeah, that's good. It's good when you have people.
I've got people, and I love hearing from them. They tell me all the time how much they are enjoying our time on Wednesdays, that they are grabbing some nuggets, that they are able to really pull from what we are discussing.
Dr. K, you have thousands of people.
I have thousands of people? Is that right, Glenn?
Yes.
I literally have thousands of people? I'm so excited about that. I am so excited to know that. If you are listening for the first time, welcome to you. If you are returning, I'm so grateful that you are here. And I'm multitasking, as many of you can see. Brother Leon is the videographer in the studio. So there are all kinds of things going on. And I didn't realize that I had my volume up on Facebook Live, and he was saying, so I'm taking my cues from Glenn and from Brother Leon. I love it. I love it. And that's the thing about live radio. It's live. And I love the fact that we are live. And we've got people tuning in. Kimberly Johnson, hello. Krishna, hello. It's so good that you're here. And Harriet, so good that you are here. Go ahead and share it while you're here. And let others know to tune in with us. Listen, I have a couple of announcements before we really get into our conversation today. I really want you to, ladies, consider registering for the 2020 I'm God's Girl for Real virtual conference. That is coming up on October 31st. You do not want to miss this virtual conference. This is the 5th year of the I'm God's Girl for Real conference. It has been absolutely mind-blowing in the previous years. If you all have been participants, there are those of you who can attest to the fact that it is just a powerful experience with God. And I have been saying, although that we're having to do it virtually this year, it is a new space, but it is the same God. And I am expecting him to show up just as he has shown up in previous years. And so I want you to go to the I'mGod'sGirlForReal.com website and grab your ticket. Again, that's I'mGod'sGirlForReal.com website, and you can grab your ticket. And listen, you can even get the t-shirt. So this year's theme is free indeed. We are declaring for our lives that we are free indeed. And so the shirt is there that makes that declaration. It says, free indeed, I'm God's girl for real. And so that is our voice in the earth. That is our intention for our lives. And I want you to just come and join us and be a part. There are some other ladies checking in. Sharetta Thomas, hey, is what she said. I'm so glad you're here. Keep joining, ladies, and sharing with others. We have a great conversation. Glenn, I don't think I've said great before. New word. You know,
That's a good one.
That's a good one,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I've just never said it. It just kind of flowed out of my mouth.
One
Oh, you know
syllable,
what I
too.
did not
One
say?
syllable.
What? Right. Look at God. Absolutely. You know what I didn't say today? That the show was going to be what? Marvelous. So I had to get it in there, Glenn. I had to get it in there. I am so grateful for Glenn and for Brother Leon. Can I have the applause for the two of you? Because you all help make this happen every week. Glenn, our engineer, producer, Brother Leon is recording for replay in a lot of different ways. And so I'm so very grateful for that. Andrea Jackson, thank you so much for joining us. So happy to have you all jumping in. So listen, got to tell you what our conversation is going to be about today. It is something that was actually a spinoff from last week because we had one of our viewers who posed a question during our Facebook Live conversation last week. And she was asking a question about fear. And her question basically was, what do you do when you want to speak up, but you are afraid? And so I did share with her that just hold that thought because next week we will respond to that question. So she was kind of the catalyst for this entire show around fearless. You know, we hear oftentimes that we should be fearless, right? But this is really about fearing less. And so we're going to actually jump into that conversation. But I thought that I will have a little story time with you before we get started. I've never done story time before. So Glenn, I'm going to do story time with the listeners. So I want you all to kind of just gather around as we have a little bit of story time. I'm actually going to read you something from a book I wrote in 2008. This was actually the first book I wrote. And the title of this book is, This Is For You, 31 Days of Life-Changing Discoveries. And this was something I wrote, and it was actually day 29 in the book. And the title of it is, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? Who's afraid of the big bad wolf? So just indulge me for a moment because I want to read this because it really sets the context for what we're going to be talking about today. It says, when I was a little girl, I loved listening to fairy tales and nursery rhymes. One of my favorite stories was The Three Little Pigs. Because it came in the audio form, I could play the album. Back then, there were albums, Glenn. I could play the album on the stereo and read the accompanying book, look at the illustrations, and sing along with the music. I thought the pigs were adorable. I loved the houses they built on the sticks and straws and bricks, but I also remember the horror I felt every time the big bad wolf entered the scene. At that time, the music would change from happy to daunting. The pictures would show the wolf creeping up on the houses in which the pigs felt secure. Because they were not alert, they didn't even know he was outside. Although I always knew how the story was going to end, I still felt afraid every time the big bad wolf threatened to huff and puff and blow their houses down. Since that time, I have had many personal encounters where the big bad wolf has shown up in my life, at the door of my heart and my mind, huffing, puffing, and trying to blow me down. Just like the pigs, when he appeared, I had a false sense of security and did not always recognize he was present. But I quickly became aware of his existence after feeling the hostile winds of adversity he blew into my life. As a result of the damage and devastation, I became apprehensive regarding making moves toward my progress. I felt hesitant in my ability to make decisions regarding the direction for my life. I felt intimidated by others who appeared to have it all together or were seemingly able to do it all. I felt discouraged by my self-perceived inability to find and pursue my purpose. I felt panic-stricken at the thought of living the rest of my days on earth in this pit. In essence, I felt the paralyzing impact of fear. I recall an experience where fear's grip had consumed my life and left me in a debilitating stupor. I knew that I could not go backwards, but I was too afraid to move forward. I had been offered advice from others whose advice ranged from, I should just get over it, or I should just move on with my life. But the weakening blows of fear had beaten me into a catatonic state that kept me in extreme dysfunction. However, in the midst of my quandary from this incapacitating experience, the Holy Spirit posed one question to me. What would you do if you weren't afraid? In other words, if you were not allowing fear to rule your life, what awesome things could you really accomplish for the purpose for which you were created? Fear not is mentioned 365 times in the Bible. Therefore, not one of your days should be spent consumed with fear. Not one day. So we're going to pick it up from there and talk about this whole notion of fearing less. How many of you could identify with what I just said? Just being so paralyzed by fear. You've come too far with God that you know that you're not going to go back, but you are too afraid and stuck where you are to go forward because you have listened to the voice of fear over and over and over again, time and time and time again, day after day, year after year. And now you are just in this place of a mundane, routine sense of existence because you have allowed fear to rob you of your destiny and your God assignment. Well, if that's you, this show is for you because we're going to dive into what it means to fear less. In other words, what do we need to do to put fear in its place? And I've got some dynamic women joining me today for this conversation. And first up is just a sweetheart of a person, and I've never met her. She became my Facebook friend, I think, years ago, and I've gotten to know her over the course of our social media connection. And she's all the way in California joining us today, and that is Oriana Dixon. Thank you so much for joining me live here on Talk Radio with Dr. K.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is so awesome to have you here. And as we chatted, we talked about this whole piece around fear less. And we talked about the fact that you have faced some really daunting things in your life that you had to overcome, basically looking fear in the face and making some decisions about how to move forward. But before you tell us how you navigated that journey, tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you're doing in the world.
Absolutely. I am an executive recruiter by trade, and I'm a health and wellness coach. I'm also a widow and a fear fighter. Fear is something that I fight with on a daily, consistent basis. I am living in the Bay Area in San Jose, unofficially known as the capital of Silicon Valley in California.
That is so amazing. I love that you just said I'm a fear fighter. So
Absolutely.
I don't know if you know this or not, Oriana, but I see T-shirts in real life, right? So I probably make a T-shirt in my mind every week. And I just saw a T-shirt with Fear Fighter on it. That is amazing. So tell us
I will get one if you make one.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about what Fear Fighter means. Help us to understand what it means to be a fear fighter.
Well, first you have to identify what fear is, and it's really it's an unpleasant emotion that's caused by a belief that you have that something dangerous is going to happen, something that's going to cause you pain or a threat. And you have to identify where that emotion is coming from. I mean, it's a natural, instinctive state of mind. So it all starts in the mind. So you have to make a mind shift. Every day you have to talk to yourself and say, okay, what am I afraid of? Why am I afraid to take this step? Why am I not doing what I'm supposed to be doing? And you need to be able to face your fears and do it anyway.
Yes.
So it doesn't mean that you're not going to have the fear before you take action. It just means that you are going to take action in spite of the fear. And that's what courage is. That's really what courage is. It's doing it in spite of.
Doing it in spite of. And I want to pause because I want to go back to something that I think is so very critical. You said you have to talk to yourself. And I think sometimes that is where we're missing it, because we are allowing fear to be in our ears and be the voice that is so loud that we forget the power of our own voice and our opportunities to have conversations with ourselves. And so what are those things that you believe are critical that we start to say to ourselves when we are trying to fight this battle with fear?
Well, first, what's going to propel you to take the action is to have faith. Mm-hmm. And there's a biblical definition of faith, which we all know, Hebrews 11:1. Now, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And then there's the Merriam-Webster definition, a firm belief in something for which there is no proof. Mm-hmm. So there are three things that I believe are critical for overcoming fear and fighting fear. One, you need to face your fear. Don't act like it's not there. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people like to over-spiritualize things because the Bible does say fear not 365 times. People take that to mean that we're not going to have any fear at all.
Right.
You're going to have fear,
yes,
but you're not going to allow fear to dictate your actions or your inaction. And number one, you need to face that fear. You need to acknowledge the fear. Two, you need to look at the false evidence that you've created in your head. Just for example, if you're afraid of getting trapped in an elevator and suffocating, ask yourself if you've ever heard of this happening to someone.
Exactly. Or is it a narrative? Because what I hear you saying is we create these false narratives. You know, things that have no basis, no substance. We don't even know that it's ever happened before, but we have created this entire narrative that we're living out of and basing our actions on and dwelling so much in what I believe you said is the emotion of fear. And it's driving and governing every single action in our lives.
That is true. That is true.
With no basis.
With no basis. So that's why you have to look at this false evidence and as my late husband would say it out loud. Because sometimes when it's in your head, it doesn't sound as crazy. But when you say it out loud, then you realize how crazy it sounds. So you may have to look in the mirror and say certain things to yourself out loud. And the third thing is, you must visualize a happy and positive outcome because what you are focused on is the danger, the pain, the what if things don't go right, what if the outcome isn't what I want, and that focusing on that is what's causing the fear to continue to grow. So you need to visualize a happy and positive outcome.
And now I'm going to happily invite my second guest to join me, Dr. Barbara Jackson. Thank you so much for joining me today on Talk Radio with Dr. K.
Certainly, it's an honor. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Well, I am so grateful to have you with me today and joining into this conversation. There are some listeners listening through the streaming live mechanism from the WOKB 1680 AM website, listening via radio and Facebook Live. So we've got listeners everywhere. And I knew that when we were talking about this conversation or this topic of fear less, Dr. Barbara, you've got some power nuggets to share with us. But before we jump into that, share with our listeners who you are and a little bit about how you're showing up in the world.
God bless you. Again, thank you so much for the invitation. I am Dr. Barbara Jackson. I am originally from Rochester, New York. I lived in Richmond for a while, and I'm currently in Davenport, Florida. I'm here in Davenport, Florida, on a word from God. I've been married to my husband for 28 years. We have 5 children. 3 of the 5 grown children is married, and I'm a nana to 5. I'm a servant of the Lord for 35 years plus. My husband and I are the pastors of Greater Life Worship Center, which is located in Davenport, Florida. There's so much more. I have a passion for the women of God and the youth, and there's so many things that I am endeavored to do. Number one, I believe that God has called me to bring encouragement, enlightenment, and empowerment. I understand that it's my task, and I'm eager to do just that.
So grateful for all that you do for the kingdom, Dr. Barbara, and she is a prayer warrior. So if you are not joining Dr. Barbara for prayer, tell us the mornings that you are praying, Dr. Barbara.
We do prayer every Tuesday from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. They can find me on the Let's Pray with Pastor Barbara Facebook page. And that's one of the things that is my passion. Everything I do is governed through prayer, under prayer, with prayer.
Absolutely. And speaking of prayer warriors, evangelist Rhonda Stinson has joined us on Facebook Live. She is a fireball for prayer. And so I'm so glad to be surrounded by women who just know how to pray. And so when we think about this whole piece around fear, Dr. Barbara, talk to us a little bit about how does prayer come into play when we are grappling with this monster of fear?
Oh, yes. Prayer is, I call it's my landing place. It's my place where I can ask God for direction and clarity and walk out that destiny and that purpose. It is in prayer that I understand that God has designed me on purpose to fulfill purpose. And so when I know that God has called me for purpose, I understand I cannot do it without prayer. And so that is definitely who I rely on to do what I do for the kingdom of God.
Yes. I was actually having a conversation with my sissy yesterday, one of my sissies, and she's actually watching. She chimed in and said that she and her husband, Dr. Jamal Searcy, they were watching with us while they're having lunch together. But I was actually having a conversation yesterday, and she was sharing with me just some nuggets that she had gleaned from something she was listening to, and talking about our need to be able to pray bold prayers. That sometimes our prayers, the word of God tells us that we have not because we ask not. And if we do, we ask amiss, meaning we are not praying specific prayers to God. We are not praying confidently. We are not praying boldly. Sometimes we really do fall into this way of thinking by saying, well, God, just whatever you do, it's okay with me. And she was saying to me that she was talking about how God's ear is attuned to our voice. He is waiting for us to ask him specific things. He is waiting to hear our heart's desire. He is waiting for us to ask. And I was even thinking about being a parent, and when my children were little, and if they came to me asking for something and they were pointing and not communicating well, the first thing I would say to them, no, use your words. right?
Mm-hmm.
Use
That's
your
right.
words. And sometimes we forget to use our words with the Father. And that's why we are stuck and paralyzed in some of our ways of being because we are simply not using our words. My next guest, Kimberly Smith. She's been here with us before, but I asked Kimberly to come back because she has an amazing testimony of facing fear, looking fear in the face, overcoming, and then seeing the power of God manifest in an amazing way. Kimberly, thank you so much for joining me again on Talk Radio with Dr. K.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
I am so glad you're back. I think I always say to guests when they're here, Glenn, don't I do this? I do it. Glenn is already saying yes before I even say what I do because he knows what I do. But it's always so good. So I always say, I've got to have you come back. And so I'm
That's
so
right.
glad that you are back again. And just in the time we have left, I'm going to jump right in with you, Kimberly, because I want you to share with the listeners just your latest news, this latest manifestation of God, and how you made the choice to push past fear to get to this place.
Absolutely. It has been such an amazing journey, and you've seen quite a bit of it, Dr. K, and grateful to have you in my corner. But what I will say is over the past few months, I've been in this space of not only wanting to make sure that I'm in true alignment, but this realizing that there's something that needs to shift.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that where I was within my career, I had outgrown that space. And the truth is, I had outgrown that space for years. But I became okay with no longer growing. Isn't it sad that we can allow life to make us settle and that it's okay to no longer grow? But I had this epiphany.
Let's pause right there really quickly because I want to
Yes.
ask the people, those of you joining us on our Facebook Live, I want you to put in the comments when you have recognized that something needs to shift, like something needs to be different.
Absolutely.
Like something needs to change. Something needs to give. Right? Have we just those times when we've had those moments of, oh my goodness, I cannot stay here. Something has got to be different for my life. And that's what I hear you describing, Kimberly.
Absolutely. You can tell that it is when you are no longer emotionally invested where you are. I mean, I had moments where I literally cried thinking, this can't be it. There's something, it's no longer comfortable. I'm no longer growing. I'm serving, I'm giving, but I'm not receiving. And when you're constantly serving, but you're not being filled, you can quickly become empty, right?
Wow.
So it wasn't until the moment of me being open to the next level and to more, even if I didn't know what that looked like, it wasn't until that moment that my curiosity kind of triggered an opportunity to come my way. So I became open to something different, whether that was going into full-time entrepreneurship, whether that was going into a different career, taking a different career move. And as soon as I became curious, I literally got an opportunity that popped up in my face. I threw my name in the hat and kind of forgot about it. I kept moving, and within about 2 weeks, I got this message from someone that I worked with years ago that asked, did you throw your name in the hat for something in your area? We need to talk. We talked. That led to a significant referral to the vice president of human resources. Within an hour, we talked. Within 2 days, I was meeting with the CEO of this organization to interview. The next week, 3 more interviews, very seamless, efficient, and very right conversations. You know when it feels right, right?
Yes.
Even with risk, even with unknown, it just felt like I was already partnering with them, and I knew this is my next assignment. So what's beautiful about this story is that, one, I had to be open and I had to lead with my curiosity. And this is the first time, and, we've been talking about this for years, Dr. K, where I am in full alignment in this role. I get to show up as the Christian Kim, as the executive coach, as the author, as the executive, in a promotion opportunity, literally being promoted in the middle of a pandemic.
Yes.
Only God could have set this up.
There is something beyond the yes. There is something beyond the yes. And so just get to the yes. There is something beyond the yes. You don't have to have all of the answers. You don't have to know what the something is. Just know that with God, there is something beyond the yes. And you know what? We're going to have to start to wrap up, Kimberly, but I had to have you come on to share this testimony. It's the second testimony, actually, and I'm going to have another young lady come on and share a very similar thing, that God just opened up this opportunity as if it was a miracle sent straight down from heaven, simply because she said yes to God and moved beyond that place of being sick and tired, going around in circles, repeating the same patterns, living a mundane and less than fruitful way of being, to walking in the yes of God, moving out of fear, fearing less, getting to yes, and experiencing the benefits of an amazing good Father. And that's why we should be focusing on not the emotion of fear, but the power in fearing less, because there is something good, so good for us on the other side. So that's our time. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're facing, and whatever is facing you, put fear in its place and remember to do this. Speak life. I'll see you next week.